Hey guys, tonight we're going deep into a world where silence wasn't just golden, it was enforced, sharpened, and trained like a muscle. Picture yourself under a pale Spartan sky, the scent of dust and olive groves hanging in the air, the distant clink of bronze fading into nothing. You're 7 years old, standing barefoot in a courtyard. Your teacher watching you with the expression of someone who's heard one too many pebbles crunch. You want to ask where the bathroom is, but you don't. You'd rather hold it until sunset than risk a raised eyebrow. Welcome to the quietest childhood in history. And honestly, you probably wouldn't survive it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who's nodding off in Oslo, and who's still awake in Osaka. Now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 7 years old now. A proud little cog in the Agoj machine, the state-run education system that's more boot camp than school. There's no singing, no cheerful recitation of the alphabet. Instead, you and a dozen other boys practice how to breathe quietly during foot races and sit motionless while a fly crawls across your knuckles. You're being trained not just to fight, but to vanish into the background when needed. The instructors aren't cruel, exactly, just monumentally unimpressed by everything. They correct posture with a flick of the eyes and expect complete obedience. With barely a whisper, the first lesson of the day: don't speak unless spoken to. Actually, scratch that, try not to speak even when spoken to. That's the goal here. Self-restraint so profound it becomes reflex. If your answer can be delivered with a nod, you nod. If you must use words, keep it under 5. The fewer syllables, the better. Spartan silence wasn't just a social quirk, it was a weapon. The state believed that the less you talked, the more you observed. Silence sharpened awareness. It bred anticipation. Historians still argue whether the goal was emotional control or tactical advantage. But either way, it turned kids into quiet little strategists. They'd watch their elders for the faintest furrowed brow. A shift in weight, a twitch of the lip hand. They learned what not to say faster than what to say. By age 8, you've learned to eat silently. You chew slowly, never slurp. Coughing earns a sharp glance. Sneezing gets you assigned to weed-pulling duty. If someone drops a spoon, they're not scolded, but everyone notices, and that's somehow worse. You can feel the unspoken shame settle over the table like a heavy linen cloth. One kid, let's call him Ariston, makes the mistake of laughing during lunch. Just a little giggle at a misplaced olive. His punishment: 3 days of silent meals, facing the wall, away from the group. He returns subdued, quieter than before. No one speaks of it, of course. They just let the silence stretch, an unspoken warning rippling across the room. And yet, beneath the quiet discipline, there's a kind of strange camaraderie. You bond with the other boys through glances and gestures, a brotherhood of unspoken thoughts. You learn to read each other's moods like weather patterns. A raised eyebrow becomes a full conversation. A shared smirk feels like a shouted joke. Every now and then, a visiting envoy from Athens or Corinth shows up to tour the training grounds. They're bewildered by the quiet. Are they always this restrained? One whispers. A Spartan elder just smiles. Talkers lose wars, he replies, with no further explanation. And it's not all stern silence either. There's something oddly humorous about the way your instructors enforce it. One man, a veteran with a beard like burnt string, to walk behind the boys during meditation drills and drop a pebble to see who flinches. He never speaks. He just nods when someone fails, then gestures toward the nearest patch of weeds. You all dread his silent chuckle more than any shouted command. Over time, you come to realize that silence here is a kind of pride. It separates Spartans from everyone else. The Athenians argue and debate. The Spartans listen. The Thebans posture and puff. The Spartans just stare. A true Lacedaemonian doesn't need volume. He has presence. Even in your dreams now, you hear. Less gone are the cheerful noises of childhood. No lullabies, no bedtime stories. Just the rustle of reeds outside the barracks, the soft snap of a flag in the wind, and the echo of your own breath in the dark. You wake without a start, without a sound, just like you were taught. And as you grow, this quiet becomes your second skin. You begin to understand that in Sparta, to be silent is not to be weak or afraid, is to be in control of yourself, of the moment, of the enemy's uncertainty. Even the bravest warrior can be rattled by what he doesn't hear. So now, when the instructor asks a question, you don't blurt. You pause, think, then deliver your answer like a chisel striking marble. One word, perfectly placed. The other boys nod. You've nailed it. And the silence goes on. You're 9 now, and chewing is a battlefield. Not against food, though that suspicious gray lump of black broth never quite stops jiggling, but against the sound of your own molars. You've been placed in a new mess group, where the stakes are high and the spoons are wooden. The boy to your left, Navigators, has somehow mastered the technique of eating an entire lentil stew with the sound profile of a falling feather. Meanwhile, you take your first bite and crack your suddenly the orchestra conductor no one asked for. The entire bench freezes. No one looks directly at you, of course, but shoulders stiffen, eyebrows twitch. Across the table, the mess supervisor, an older man, with the posture of a statue, and the vocal range of a tired owl, blinks twice. You don't need words to know what that means. Try again, quieter this time. Food here isn't just nourishment. It's another lesson. Meals are eaten communally, but not socially. No conversation, no second helpings. And definitely no smacking, slurping, burping, or lip-licking. The goal is self-control in every movement, even digestion. If your stomach gurgles, you do your best to ignore it. If your broth splashes, you wipe it quietly. Historians still debate whether this emphasis on silent eating was rooted in ritual, discipline, or just the desire to avoid hearing someone loudly suck marrow from a bone during a strategy meeting. You begin to develop little tricks, soaking your bread longer so it doesn't crunch, holding your breath while chewing, swallowing slowly to prevent that dreaded gulp sound that echoes like a canyon in the stone halls. Eventually, your body learns. Your jaw cooperates. Your food goes down without a peep. The older boys watch you from across the room. One nods slightly. A small victory, but then there's the gay-man unspoken tradition among your peers. It's called the olive test. The challenge: eat an entire olive, pit and all, without making a sound. The pit must stay tucked in the cheek or under the tongue until the end of the meal, when everyone secretly spits theirs out onto a shared rock behind the mess hall. The winner is the one with no one noticing. You try it. The olive is bitter. Slick. The pit feels like a rock lodged in your throat. But you pull it off. Later, when the boys gather at the rock, your pit clinks down among the rest. No one says anything, but a few subtle smiles pass through the group. You're becoming one of them. The silence oddly grows comforting, predictable, calming even. In the din of the outside world, the chaotic trade markets of Athens, the philosophical debates of Corinth, there's constant chatter. But in Sparta, stillness, precision, focus. It starts to feel like an anchor. You know when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. One afternoon, a visiting merchant is allowed into the mess hall for observation. He brings sweet cakes from the East, smuggled in under diplomatic hospitality. He talks and talks. You've never heard someone describe raisins in such poetic detail. The boys sit in silence, blinking slowly. Someone sneezes. No one reacts. Finally, one of the instructors, an old warrior, with a voice like dry leaves, simply holds up one finger. The merchant stops mid-sentence. No explanation. He clears his throat and takes the hint. Historians still argue whether this scene was scripted or genuine. But either way, it left the visitors deeply unnerved. Silence, here, is more than absence of sound. It's a form of power, a test, a language all its own. You begin to understand that quiet mouths mean sharper minds, that every pause carries weight, that a glance or gesture can slice through confusion faster than any sensible explanation. Your evenings become exercises in control. After meals, the younger boys practice reciting orders in a whisper. Commands like form up or advance are spoken through barely parted lips. You're taught to listen for breath patterns, to recognize a comrade's cough from 3 tenths away. You even practice not reacting when someone tries to make you laugh during these drills, because, in a real battle, a giggle could be a death sentence. And still, the chewing matters. One day, a trainee forgets himself and starts humming while chewing just a low little tune, absent-minded. He doesn't notice until the entire table has gone still. He stops, horrified. No one punishes him, but he isn't invited to the silent patrol drills for 2 weeks. A quiet exile. When he returns, he eats like a ghost. Meanwhile, you've grown proud of your silence. You've begun to move more deliberately. Even the way you set down your bowl langled slightly so it doesn't scrape is part of the choreography. Your every motion is trimmed, tuned, and muted. It's oddly satisfying. Then, one night, while walking back from the mess, you pass a cluster of younger boys practicing their stealth crawl across the gravel paths. One of them spots you and freezes. He's mid-crawl, face in the dirt, toes barely moving. He waits. You walk past without a word. Just a slight nod. That's all it takes. You were him once. He'll get there. You lie down on your cot. The day done, your stomach still echoing with broth and discipline. You pull the wool blanket over your shoulders, breathe in slow, and let the quiet fill the room like mist. No dreams tonight. Just stillness, the kind you've earned. By the time you're 10, you've discovered that silence is more than a roulette's a sport. The whispering games are unofficial, spontaneous, and intensely competitive. They're not taught in the barracks. Curriculum, of course. No elder will admit they exist. But every Spartan boy knows them. The premise is simple. Pass a message from one end of the courtyard to the other without being caught. The catch: you're not allowed to speak above the faintest whisper. Most of the time, you don't even use your voice, you use your lips. Movements so slight they barely count as words. A twitch, a flicker. Sometimes a nudge of the elbow and a pointed look does the trick. You crouch behind a pillar, hands pressed against the cool stone, trying not to breathe too loudly. Your friend Polynesian, 2 shadows away, lifts his chin one signal to go. You mouth the message. F4 coming. Hide bread. He blinks once, then turns and begins the chain, each boy passing the phrase along like a fragile, invisible thread. If one boy laughs, sneezes, or gets spotted moving his lips too obviously, the whole group fails. And sometimes, if the F4 really is coming, the consequences include extra training runs, or peeling olives for an entire week in dead silence. The record: 12 boys, 1 message, full courtyard, and not a single whisper heard. You were the 5th link in that chain. A personal triumph. These games are more than child's play. They're training. You're learning how to deliver intelligence under pressure. How to stay calm while communicating delicate information. How to read the tension in someone's face before they even move. Historians still argue whether these games were part of an intentional state program or merely an organic outgrowth of a culture obsessed with restraint. Either way, the skill set sticks. And it's not just verbal messages. The most elite players in the whispering games invent codes. A slow blink might mean yes. 2 fingers tapped on a thigh might mean wait. A nose scratch could mean danger or dinner, depending on the direction of the scratch. It's absurd. It's brilliant. It's incredibly stressful. And you love it. One afternoon, the instructor surprises you. He selects 4 of the best whisperers and gives them a challenge. Deliver a warning to a sleeping elder in the northern barracks without waking anyone else in the room. You're chosen. The barracks are deadly quiet, the kind of silence that makes your own heartbeat sound like a drum roll. You pad across the floor, avoiding the boards creak. You crouch beside the elder's bed, lean close, and exhale the warning into his ear. Scouts at gate, you're needed. He doesn't move, then slowly, deliberately, he opens one eye and nods. You've passed. You return to your bed without a word. In the morning, nothing is said, but the instructor gives you a subtle pat on the shoulder before drill. Outside Sparta, this would all be unthinkable. Children playing telephone in whispers. Being praised for not speaking. Elsewhere in Greece, wit and rhetoric were prized. Young Athenians gave speeches and debated their elders. But here, the quieter you are, the smarter people assume you must be. The more silent your presence, the heavier your influence. That's why you start seeing the elder boys differently now. The most respected among them rarely speak at all. They stand slightly apart, arms crossed, eyes sharp. When they do speak, it's like thunder out of clear sky. 1 syllable, perfectly timed, can end a debate. There's an art to waiting. One boy, Theron, becomes a legend for answering every question with a pause so long, people wonder if he's fallen asleep. But no, he's simply considering. When he does respond, it's with the brevity of a sword strike. No, or yes, or later. His peers follow his lead. Even the instructors defer to his pacing. You try it yourself. During sparring, a younger boy accuses you of cheating. You don't react. You just stare at him, breathing slow. He fumbles, then falters, then mumbles something and walks away. You don't even need a rebuttal. Your silence was the rebuttal. That night, you lie awake thinking about that. How in Sparta, silence is like a river that carves the shape of everything around it. Loudness belongs to the weak, noise to the careless. But silence, that belongs to the prepared. The games go on. New challenges emerge. Whispering a phrase while running. Delivering a code through eye movement alone. You're assigned a silent partner, a boy who shadows your patrols, and you his. The goal. Learn to communicate without ever being seen doing so. It's frustrating at first. He misreads a signal. You nearly collide. But after weeks of shared drills, you're moving in tandem, a wordless team of synchronized thoughts. Once, during a training march, a wild dog bursts from the trees. The group flinches, except you and your partner. Without a word, you turn toward the threat, step apart, and raise your staffs. The dog backs down. The instructors say nothing. But when camp is set that night, you notice your sleeping rolls are slightly closer to the fire. That's as close to a medal as you'll ever get here. And so the days stretch on, quiet and full of meaning. You speak less. You listen more. You start to hear things others miss. The crackle of tension before a fight. The barely audible footstep of someone about to trip. The anxious breath of a boy about to cry. You know what to do in all those moments, usually. Say nothing. Just be present. That's the Spartan way. You're 11 now, and silence is no longer just a daily practice. It's a test you can fail. And today, someone does. A boy named Damus drops his bronze cup during morning cleanup. It clatters against the stone floor, loud as thunder in the cold dawn air. No one reacts, not right away. The instructor freezes mid-step, his cloak rustling faintly as it settles. The other boys stop folding their bedding. You're holding your sandals, one in each hand, and you don't even blink. Damus stares at the cup like it betrayed him. He picks it up slowly, placing it down with exaggerated care. The silence stretches, more punishing than any shout. That's the thing about Spartan discipline. The louder the mistake, the quieter the consequence. By midday, Damus is nowhere to be seen. Not banished, just reassigned. He's working the perimeter fields, trimming hedges that don't grow, or maybe weeding dust. It's not a punishment, exactly. Just a redirection, a reminder. Everyone understands. Drop something loud, and you drop in rank. It's a powerful lesson. Noise draws attention. Attention breeds questions. Questions lead to weakness. You internalize it so deeply that even your dreams are muffled now. There's a particular drill that drives this home, the quiet walk. You and your squad must cross a long corridor lined with gravel, dry leaves, and poorly positioned pebbles. You're barefoot, there's no talking, no gestures, no second tries. Every step must be perfect heel, ball toe, like a cat crossing a rooftop. You've practiced it for weeks. One boy coughs, he's out. Another brushes a toe against a twig on. You make it halfway when a mosquito lands on your shoulder. You do nothing. It bites. You flinch, just a little. A soft shuffle of your foot. You fail, it stings. figuratively more than literally. You spend the evening redoing your form with a silent mentor, a boy 3 years older who hasn't been heard speaking since winter. He corrects your posture with gentle taps and places a leaf under your heel to teach weight control. You try again the next day. This time, you finish the corridor in total silence. A small nod from your instructor follows. No applause. Just acknowledgement. Outside Sparta, this would seem ridiculous. In Athens, you might have laughed about stepping on a stick. But here, that stick is the difference between surviving a scouting mission and being seen by the enemy. Historians still argue whether this level of precision was necessary or performative. But even critics admit, the Spartans had the lowest casualty rate among reconnaissance units. You begin to notice the sounds you don't make, the absence of clatter when you set down your gear, the smooth whisper of cloth when you dress, the precise thunk of your sandals touching the floor in perfect sync with your breath. During one lesson, a boy sneezes mid-mid. Not a huge sneeze, just a sharp little tch. The instructor opens one eye. Everyone holds their breath. Then slowly, the instructor reaches into a pouch and removes a turnip. He places it in front of the boy without a word. You all know what it means. The boy will carry the turnip everywhere for a week during drills, during meals, even while sleeping. A burden of noise. It becomes a running joke, silently of course. When someone makes even the slightest slip, the others mime turnips behind their backs. You once see two older trainees pass each other in the corridor and raise imaginary turnips without breaking stride. It's the Spartan version of a punchline. He doesn't move. Then slowly, deliberately, he opens one eye and nods. You've passed. You return to your bed without a word. In the morning, nothing is said. But the instructor gives you a subtle pat on the shoulder before drill. Outside Sparta, this would all be unthinkable. Children playing telephone in whispers. Being praised for not speaking. Elsewhere in Greece, wit and rhetoric were prized. Young Athenians gave speeches and debated their elders. But here, the quieter you are, the smarter people assume you must be. The more silent your presence, the heavier your influence. That's why you start seeing the elder boys differently now. The most respected among them rarely speak at all. They stand slightly apart, arms crossed, eyes sharp. When they do speak, it's like thunder out of clear sky. One syllable, perfectly timed, can end a debate. There's an art to waiting, too. One boy, Theron, becomes a legend for answering every question with a pause so long, people wonder if he's fallen asleep. But no, he's simply considering. When he does respond, it's with the brevity of a sword strike. No, or yes, or later. His peers follow his lead. Even the instructors defer to his pacing. You try it yourself. During sparring, a younger boy accuses you of cheating. You don't react. You just stare at him, breathing slow. He fumbles, then falters, then mumbles something and walks away. You don't even need a rebuttal. Your silence was the rebuttal. That night, you lie awake thinking about that. How, in Sparta, silence is like a river that carves the shape of everything around it. Loudness belongs to the weak, noise to the careless, but silence, that belongs to the prepared. The games go on. New challenges emerge, whispering a phrase while running, delivering a code through eye movement alone. You're assigned a silent partner, a boy who shadows your patrols, and you his. The goal: learn to communicate without ever being seen doing so. It's frustrating at first. He misreads a signal. You nearly collide. But after weeks of shared drills, you're moving in tandem, a wordless team of synchronized thoughts. Once, during a training march, a wild dog bursts from the trees. The group flinches, except you and your partner. Without a word, you turn toward the threat, step apart, and raise your staffs. The dog backs down. The instructors say nothing, but when camp is set that night, you notice your sleeping rolls are slightly closer to the fire. That's as close to a medal as you'll ever get here. And so, the days stretch on, quiet and full of meaning. You speak less, you listen more. You start to hear things others miss. The crackle of tension before a fight. The barely audible footstep of someone about to trip. The anxious breath of a boy about to cry. You know what to do in all those moments. Usually say nothing. Just be present. That's the Spartan way. You're 11 now, and silence is no longer just a daily practice. It's a test you can fail. And today, someone does. A boy named Damus drops his bronze cup during morning cleanup. It clatters against the stone floor, loud as thunder in the cold dawn air. No one reacts, not right away. The instructor freezes mid-step, his cloak rustling faintly as it settles. The other boys stop folding their bedding. You're holding your sandals, one in each hand, and you don't even blink. Damus stares at the cup like it betrayed him. He picks it up slowly, placing it down with exaggerated care. The silence stretches, more punishing than any shout. That's the thing about Spartan discipline. The louder the mistake, the quieter the consequence. By midday, Damus is nowhere to be seen. Not banished, just reassigned. He's working the perimeter fields, trimming hedges that don't grow, or maybe weeding dust. It's not a punishment, exactly, just a redirection, a reminder. Everyone understands. Drop something loud, and you drop in rank. It's a powerful lesson. Noise draws attention. Attention breeds questions. Questions lead to weakness. You internalize it so deeply that even your dreams are muffled now. There's a particular drill that drives this home, the quiet walk. You and your squad must cross a long corridor lined with gravel, dry leaves, and poorly positioned pebbles. You're barefoot, there's no talking, no gestures, no second tries. Every step must be perfect heel, ball toe, like a cat crossing a rooftop. You've practiced it for weeks. One boy coughs, he's out. Another brushes a toe against a twig, gone. You make it halfway when a mosquito lands on your shoulder. You do nothing, it bites. You flinch just a little. A soft shuffle of your foot. You fail, it stings, figuratively, more than literally. You spend the evening redoing your form with a silent mentor. A boy 3 years older who hasn't been heard speaking since winter. He corrects your posture with gentle taps and places a leaf under your heel to teach weight control. You try again the next day. This time, you finish the corridor in total silence. A small nod from your instructor follows. No applause. Just acknowledgement. Outside Sparta, this would seem ridiculous. In Athens, you might have laughed about stepping on a stick. But here, that stick is the difference between surviving a scouting mission and being seen by the enemy. Historians still argue whether this level of precision was necessary or performative. But even critics admit, the Spartans had the lowest casualty rate among reconnaissance units. You begin to notice the sounds you don't make. The absence of clatter when you set down your gear. The smooth whisper of cloth when you dress. The precise thunk of your sandals touching the floor in perfect sync with your breath. During one lesson, a boy sneezes mid-meditation. Not a huge sneeze, just a sharp little tch. The instructor opens one eye. Everyone holds their breath. Then slowly the instructor reaches into a pouch and removes a turnip. He places it in front of the boy without a word. You all know what it means. The boy will carry the turnip everywhere for a week during drills, during meals, even while sleeping. A burden of noise, it becomes a running joke silently, of course. When someone makes even the slightest slip, the others mime turnips behind their backs. You once see two older trainees pass each other in the corridor and raise imaginary turnips without breaking stride. It's the Spartan version of a punchline. Then there's the ritual of standing still in storms. During heavy rain, your squad is ordered into the courtyard. You line up and stand perfectly still while the wind howls and the rain lashes down like a punishment from Zeus himself. The point is simple. Don't react, don't speak, don't move, no shivering, no groaning, just stillness. You last 15 minutes before your teeth start chattering. You press your tongue against them to quiet the sound. Others fold their lips inward. One boy's nose starts running. He lets it. He passes. These moments shape you, not into a statue but into someone who can choose when to be stone and when to become shadow. You're learning to exist without disrupting your environment. Like fog, like a whisper in a dream. One evening, during a rare break, the younger boys are allowed to rest near the fire. An instructor tells a story not with words, but with gestures. His hands mimic a bird in flight, a spear thrown, a man falling. You watch, transfixed. The entire tale, from beginning to end, unfolds without a syllable, and everyone understands it perfectly. That night, you try it yourself. You reenact a small tale for your squad fox sneaking into a hen. You use your fingers as paws, your lips twitching just so. They laugh silently, of course, just shaking shoulders and wide eyes. You're learning to entertain without sound, to communicate without voice, to discipline without anger. Even the animals in Sparta seem quieter. The goats bleat less. The dogs bark only when they must. The birds, they probably whisper. Or maybe you've just learned to tune out everything unnecessary. When you lie down to sleep, you hear nothing at first. Then slowly, the world fills in. The soft creak of a distant door. The rhythmic hush of wind through pine trees. The flutter of a moth's wings near the ceiling. These aren't noises, they're texture, life. And you now know how to move through all of it without leaving a ripple. You're 12 now, and stealth has started to outrank strength. You still wrestle, still run uphill with rocks tied to your back, still spar with blunt spears until your arms scream, but more and more. The true tests involve silence. You begin to realize, in Sparta, brawn is impressive, but quiet. Quiet is sacred. One of your newest drills proves this. It's called the shadow run. Each boy is given a short route to cover through olive groves, over low walls, across loose dirt and stone while an instructor waits in the dark with his ears sharpened like a fox. If he hears you, he doesn't shout. He simply chalks your name on a slate. In the morning, the names on the board get assigned an extra hour of bucket duty. You watch the slate like it's an oracle. Your name has yet to appear. Not because you're lucky. Because you've learned, you run flat-footed now. You exhale through your nose. You know how to move without breaking twigs, how to step where the moss is thickest, how to shift your weight forward like wind instead of thunder. Once, you even cross the entire path barefoot, not because it's required, but because your sandals started to squeak. Pain is temporary. Squeaking is unacceptable. One night, your squad is told to approach the instructor's hut and retrieve a marked scroll without waking the sleeping guard dog. You all draw straws for order. Your third, the first boy, makes it to the hut, retrieves the scroll, but on the way back, his knee brushes a clay jar. The clink is soft, but unmistakable. The dog lifts its head. Everyone freezes. The second boy decides to wait. Smart move. The dog sniffs, settles back down. Now it's your turn. You approach slow, measured. Each footstep a whisper. You avoid the jar entirely, hug the wall, pause when the dog shifts. When you make it back, scroll in hand, no one cheers. But the instructors make a rare exception and offer the group warm broth that night. No one says it was because of your success. But they all know. These moments make the lesson clear. Silence is strength. Silence is safety. Historians still argue whether Spartan stealth practices influenced their battlefield success, especially during raids and ambushes. But there's no denying the Spartans were feared not just for their muscle, but for their mastery of moving unseen and unheard. At meals, even the clinking of cups has decreased. You and your fellow trainees now drink with your eyes down and wrists steady. There's a new boy in your squad, just arrived from a remote village near the Tagitis Mountains. He talks to much ASCs where everyone's from, asks if anyone likes figs, asks what the black broth actually is. No one answers. By the third day he's silent. Not out of fear, out of realization. He understands now. Here, silence is the language. There's a story passed among the older boys about a Spartan sentry who was caught by an enemy scout in the woods. Rather than call for help or shout, he simply held his position, watched the scout, followed him, and when the time came struck silently from the shadows. No words, just duty. No one knows if it's true. Doesn't matter. The point lands either way. You begin to notice how instructors test you in new ways. One sneezes during a silent march deliberately, just to see who breaks form. Another drops a small coin near your bedroll. If you pick it up without permission, you fail the test of discipline. If you report it aloud, you fail the test of restraint. The correct answer? Silently place the coin on the instructor's sleeping mat. You do exactly that. You're learning the system now. Its rhythm. Its logic. The quiet isn't always oppressive. Sometimes it's beautiful. On some mornings, you and your unit hike into the hills before sunrise. You sit overlooking the valley, steam rising from the earth like breath. No one speaks, not even the instructors. You all just sit in stillness, listening to the world wake up, the breeze in the grasses, the distant bleat of sheep, the soft crunch of someone adjusting their seat on a rock. That's it. That's the entire lesson. Once you catch a glimpse of the city below, a rare moment of freedom. You see the agora, the market, people talking, arguing, calling to one another. It's overwhelming, the sheer sound of it. You're amazed you once lived among that now. Even the idea of shouting feels foreign. You belong to silence. A new punishment enters the rotation. The loud list. Every week, the instructors post the names of boys who made unnecessary noise. There's no explanation, just names. The punishment, nothing at all. No extra chores. No lectures. But that list, it burns. No one wants to be on it. Not because it leads to trouble, but because it implies weakness, a lack of control. You've never made the list. And now, you treat each movement, each breath, each blink as part of the test. You begin practicing speaking in reverse, starting with breath, then tone, then shape of lips, before uttering a single word. The result, you speak slowly, deliberately. Your voice is low, calm, efficient. That's how Spartans sound. Not because they're forced to. Because they've chosen precision over volume. Soon, a visiting envoy from Delphi comes to observe the trainees. He tries to engage the boys in conversation, asking about their routines, their diets, their favorite drills. The boys stare. Number 1 responds. The instructor finally speaks. They'll speak when they have something to say. The envoy leaves shaken. And you sleep soundly that night. Because you know the lesson is settling deep in your bones now. In a world that never stops talking, you are becoming the still point. The eye of the storm. The pause between strikes. You're 13 now, and the nights are yours. Not for sleep though, that would be nice, but for patrol. The instructors call it silent watch. And the assignment is simple. Patrol the barracks perimeter from moonrise to the third owl call, alone. Without making a single sound. No coughing, no stomping, no yawns that creak the jaw. You carry no torch. You wear soft soles. You listen more than you move. Each creak of wood, each rustle of leaves, every bark from a distant farm dog becomes a test. Not of your bravery but of your stillness. This is where the real Spartans are made, under cover of stars. With nothing but silence and shadows for company. You learn to regulate your breath, so it doesn't mist loudly in the cool night air. You learn the difference between a loose pebble and a dry beetle carcass underfoot. You learn to tighten your belt just enough that it doesn't squeak when you turn. There's a kind of music to it all. Not actual sound, but rhythm, timing, tension. Historians still debate whether these night watches were more about discipline or psychological hardening. Maybe both. Either way, you soon come to expect the unexpected. Instructors occasionally test you with surprises. A clumsily dropped stone to see if you react. A decoy figure skulking along the fence to tempt a shout. React too loudly, and the night resets for you. Some boys end up doing double shifts this way. You never have. On your third silent watch, something strange happens. You spot movement near the mess hall, a shadow gliding just where torchlight fades. You step into position, grip your training spear tight, and wait. The figure freezes. A long pause. Then a whisper barely audible. It's me, it's Theron. One of the older boys, testing the perimeter. He could have just walked past. Instead, he whispered something rarely done, especially at night. You nod once and continue your patrol. That nod carries meaning. You saw him, he saw you. The job got done. No noise necessary. In the mess, the next morning, you catch his eye. He gives you the Spartan equivalent of praise. An extra slice of barley bread, placed silently on your tray, no words exchanged. You feel like a general. You start to understand how this silent world shapes everything. Not just training, but identity. You think differently now. You don't rush to fill empty air with talk. You observe first, respond later. You've become the kind of person who watches someone tie a sandal and learns their entire mood from the way they wrap the strap. One evening, a younger boy asks softly why Spartans don't speak. It's not forbidden to ask, though it's rare. You're about to answer, but an instructor does it for you. We speak, he says, but not to hear ourselves. Only when we want others to hear us. It's a simple phrase, but it lands hard. You remember it for weeks. The training escalates. You and your unit are assigned to ambush drills. The idea: hide along a narrow path and wait for a passing group, usually unsuspecting younger trainees. You're not to strike unless the signal is given, and that signal can't be verbal, so you invent one. A single click of the tongue behind your teeth. It's subtle, almost imperceptible. Your team knows to listen for it. But there's a risk. If even one trainee hears it before the strike, you lose. So, you modulate the click until it's more like a flick of breath, barely, more than an exhale. When the ambush finally comes, it's a flawless strike. The group is caught completely off guard. The instructors don't clap, of course not. But they walk by later that night and place an extra log on your fire. That's something. Another day. You're tasked with trailing a visiting dignitary as part of a stealth exercise. He doesn't know you're shadowing him, and the goal is to follow him through the outer city without being seen or heard. He's a loud man, draped in silks, fond of gesturing and muttering about the dust. You stay 10 steps behind, always to his left, just inside the building's shadows. He never notices. At one point, he pauses to look at a vendor's pottery. You freeze behind a column. He scratches his head, mutters about Spartan gloom, then moves on. You smile silently. Afterward, your instructor gives you a rare nod and mutters, "He never knew you existed." Good. You wear that praise like armor. Silence now defines your sense of self. When others flinch, you stand still. When others speak, you wait. You've become the type of boy who can cross a courtyard full of dried leaves without leaving a trail. Who can stand in the corner of a crowded room and know more than those in the center. And when new trainees arrive, loud and eager, full of chatter and jokes, you don't scold them. You don't even glare. You just sit quietly at the edge of the mess and let the silence teach them. It always does. They notice how everyone else waits a second longer before responding. How even laughter comes soft and short. How mistakes like clanging a ladle bring nothing but a long look and sudden solitude. Soon they begin to whisper, then murmur, then nothing. Just nods, just glances. The cycle repeats. You don't have to speak to see it. The silence has spread. By 14, your silence has matured into something else entirely: presence. You can now walk into a room and draw attention not by speaking, but by the very absence of speech. Your silence isn't empty anymore. It's dense, weighted, and everyone can feel it. You're no longer just one of the boys trying to stay quiet. You're one of the boys others try to emulate. Newer recruits watch how you sit during training briefings, how you rest your hands in your lap without fidgeting, how you lower your eyes just enough to appear focused. never weak. And they try to copy that, poorly, at first. But you were the same once. At this point, eye contact is your first language. You've developed what instructors call the look-away of holding someone. S-gaze that conveys more meaning than most full sentences. You use it to signal readiness, disapproval, agreement, even the occasional joke. And when done correctly, others respond in kind. You've traded syllables for subtleties. There's a drill now called the standoff. Two boys are placed in a training ring. No weapons, no movement. No instructions except this. Speak first, and you lose. The idea is simple, but the execution brutal. You stand, muscles aching, breath shallow, face impassive, across from someone who wants nothing more than to win. But winning means waiting. For hours, if necessary. Your first standoff lasts 16 minutes. Your second, nearly 40. You win by simply doing nothing better than your opponent. He twitches, blinks too hard, whispers an insult under his breath. You say nothing, the match is over. Everyone nods. You get an extra rest day, though no one mentions it aloud. Just a blank on the duty roster next to your name. Spartan silence. You're realizing is less about not talking and more about mastering restraint. It's a constant low-level discipline, like holding a full cup of water while walking over cobblestones. One wrong shift, and the whole illusion spills at meals. You begin to pick up on another subtle layer. Breathing. You notice how the instructors breathe slowly while eating, in perfect rhythm. No snorting, no wheezing. You try it too. At first it feels ridiculous, who breathes correctly? But then you see it working. Your body relaxes. Your hand movements become smoother. You're more aware of your posture. Somehow, your food even tastes better. Silence, it seems, fine-tunes the senses. Then comes your promotion. Nothing grand, of course. Just a quiet nod from your instructor, and a new sash dark red, worn across the shoulder. It signifies leadership potential. You'll now supervise younger recruits during drills. Not by commanding them, but by demonstrating. This is where you learn the next phase of Spartan silence. Teaching without words, it's harder than it sounds. One boy struggles with his stance during stealth practice. You approach him, adjust his shoulders, tap his ankles. To correct his spacing, then stand beside him and demonstrate the move again, silent, fluid, precise. He watches, tries again. Closer this time. Another adjustment, another trial. No lecture, no encouragement. Just effort, correction, and repetition. The end of the hour, he's mastered it. And he thanks you not with words, but with a deep nod and an expression that says everything. There's power in that. Teaching without noise. In Sparta, wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers. And sometimes, it doesn't even whisper, it simply shows you're assigned a special task, to serve as a silent observer during a council meeting between two E4s. Your job, stand in the corner, listen, record. Not with a scroll, but with your memory. No shifting, no sighing. No scratching your nose when it itches. You stand like a statue and absorb everything. They speak rarely. In fact, most of the conversation is done through gestures, grunts, even silences, layered on silences. One F4 proposes something by raising his eyebrow. The other disagrees by not reacting. A long pause. Then both nod slightly. Decision made. You never learn what it was, but you remember the rhythm of the exchange, the economy of it. Every second mattered. Historians still debate whether Spartan governance was efficient or just intimidatingly obscure, but sitting in that room, you get the sense that silence kept things from spiraling. In a world full of argument, the Spartans preferred calculation. You report back to your instructor the next day, reciting every movement, every shift in tone. He grunts once in approval. You remembered it all. You don't answer. You just nod. Now even your dreams have changed. You dream in glances, in hand signals, in the sound of wind through trees instead of battle cries. It's not that you're repressing speech. You just don't need it. One afternoon, you're paired with a visiting boy from Thessaly for sparring. He's skilled, but talkative. Boasts about his home, about his speed, his victories. You say nothing, just circle, watch, calculate. When the match begins, he moves fast but too loud. You sidestep, trip him, end it with a single, clean move. No celebration. You simply help him up and return to your place. He doesn't speak again for the rest of the day. You're not the best fighter, not the strongest, but increasingly, you're the most composed, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who doesn't ask questions because you already know where to find the answer in people's bodies, their choices, their silences. You're becoming a Spartan, not by muscle, but by mastery of yourself. And soon, the silence around you no longer feels heavy. It feels earned. By 15, the silence you've learned has ripened into an instinct. You no longer think about it consciously, it's simply who you are. You speak only when absolutely necessary, and when you do, your words land like dropped stones in a still pond, quiet, precise, and impossible to ignore. You've been selected for a new kind of training now, the hush march. It's not about distance, or speed, or endurance. It's about coordination in total silence. Your unit is given a narrow mountain path and ordered to descend in full formation without uttering a word or making a sound loud enough to echo off the rock walls. You're told nothing more. No instructions on how to avoid sliding gravel. No hints about the sentries hidden in the brush who will alert if you're heard. Just the path, the silence, and yourselves. You start first. You know the trick. Let your knees absorb the descent. Keep your center low. Test each rock with your toes before shifting your weight. You communicate with hand signals only. Palm down means slow. 2 fingers forward means advance. You make it halfway before one of the boys dislodges a pebble that clinks down the path like a warning bell. A faint whistle from the trees confirms it. That boy is sent back. The rest of you press on, like wolves padding through pine needles. By the time you reach the bottom, your legs are shaking from the effort, but not a single sound escaped. The instructor waiting at the base doesn't speak. He just scribbles your names on a slate and waves you back up. The climb is worse than the descent a bit. Your silence earned the privilege. This is how the Spartan system works. The reward for excellence isn't comfort. It's more challenge. And the reward for silence, more silence. You've learned to use it tactically now. During sparring, for instance, you stay quiet, even when hit, especially when hit. Other boys grunt, growl, bark. You just breathe. You take the blow, recenter your footing, and keep moving. It throws them off, They want noise. They expect it. Without it, they can't gauge your pain, your timing, your strategy. You've become unreadable. One boy, Uenos, is famous for taunting opponents. He talks constantly, mocking, joking, rattling nerves. He tries it with you. Tells you your stance. Looks like a goat with a limp. You don't respond. Just watch him. When the match begins, he rushes in, confident, chattering. You wait, listen. Watch his shoulder dip, hand strike before he finishes his next joke. He's flat on his back before the sentence ends. You offer your hand, he takes it. He doesn't talk again for the rest of the week. The instructors begin using you in demonstration drills, not because you're the strongest, but because you move like a whisper. During one session, an elder walks into the training ground with a jug of water. He pours a single drop into a bowl and says, "That's your goal. Move like that, no splash." Then he nods to you. Without speaking, you perform the slow roll forward. Rise, step back. The bowl doesn't shake. The younger boys take notice. They try to mimic your movements. Some ask you questions. How do you step without stomping? How do you land without thudding? You don't answer out loud. You just show them. Over and over. A hand here, a shift in weight there. The silence becomes its own kind of mentorship. Historians still debate how deeply embedded these silent rituals were in Spartan society. Were they official policy, unwritten customs, ingrained trauma responses, maybe all of the above? But in your experience, they're practical, logical, necessary, and you wouldn't train any other way. Then comes your next assignment: escort. A visiting philosopher from Miletus arrives to observe the you're chosen to guide him from one site to another. The twist: you must do so without speaking a word. He's confused at first. He asks questions. You don't answer. You simply gesture with your hand, tilt your head, move forward. He follows. Along the way, you guide him through the wrestling yard, the barracks, the mess hall. He speaks the whole time mostly to himself, observing, wondering aloud how young men can be trained like this, how a city so quiet can feel so thunderous in presence by the end of the walk. He says, "You've said nothing, and yet you've shown me more than I could have imagined." You nod once, then walk away. He watches you go in silence. You begin to notice how outsiders react to Spartan silence. Most are unnerved. Traders arrive with carts and wagons full of goods, talking loudly, trying to sell, flatter, negotiate. Spartan buyers say nothing. They gesture. They nod. They walk away if displeased. No haggling, no debate. The traders learn quickly. In Sparta, silence is the negotiation. Even animals seem to adapt. The horses at the stables don't whinny as much. The dogs bark only when necessary. One dog, nicknamed Ghost, has learned to move alongside your patrols without a leash or command. You suspect he's mimicking you. You sleep differently now. You don't toss. You don't groan. Your body shuts down like a lantern being extinguished, clean, immediate, total. Some nights, you lie awake for a few moments longer, just to listen. To the breath of your squadmates, to the wind pressing through the cracks in the wooden walls, to the hum of silence that never quite disappears. It's become a comfort, a companion. Soon, the silence will be tested. You know that the final phase is approaching, the one they only whisper about, the cryptia. but you don't dread it. You're preparing, quietly, slowly, completely. Because now you know silence isn't the absence of voice, it's the presence of control. You're 16 now. And finally the whispers become real. The instructors gather you and the others, marked with red sashes. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a nod and a quiet order. Walk with me. You follow without question, deeper into the hills, away from the training yards, away from the predictable rhythm of drills and rations. This is the first step of the cryptia. You've heard about it for years, always in hushed tones, half warning, half myth. Historians still argue what the cryptia truly was: state-sanctioned policing, a survival exam, a rite of terror. Even the old instructors refuse to define it clearly. That ambiguity is part of the test. Tonight, all you know is this: you've been selected. And you may not come back the same. You are stripped of your sash and your tunic, given a knife, no food, no bedding, just a gesture toward the southern hills and the quiet command: survive, watch, report. You head into the night alone. There's no trail, just the uneven brush of low shrubs and jagged stone underfoot. The moon hangs low, cold and indifferent. You adjust to the dark quickly. Your footsteps vanish into the dust like you were never there. That's the idea. You find a thicket to rest in just for a moment. No fire, no shelter, just silence. The wind carries distant sounds, frogs in a marsh, an owl's cry, and further still the faint stomp of something heavier, a traveler's cart, or another cryptia boy. You don't move. You don't breathe loud enough to fog the night air. This is your task. Now move unseen among Sparta's outer villages. Observe, report threats, signs of rebellion, disorder. Some say you're meant to intimidate. Others say your silence is what keeps balance in the state. Neither explanation sits comfortably in your chest. But questions don't belong to this night. Only vigilance. You survive on roots, insects, and rainwater, collected in the curve of your hand. Hunger claws at your stomach, but you don't flinch. You begin to hear more. A dropped hoe in a distant field. A sneeze in a goat pen. One night, the cry of a child pierces the stillness and you stop in your tracks. Not because of the noise, but because you realize you reacted to it. The next day, you train your ears harder. You must know the sound, but never let the sound know you. There's another Boynikon whom you glimpse just once. A flicker of movement in the trees. You exchange no words, just eyes meeting and partying. You both know the rules. You pass near a farmhouse one morning. A woman kneels outside, washing clothes in a trough. Her back is to you. Her dog lifts its head, sniffs once, then lies back down. You've passed the dog test. You move on. One day, a storm traps you beneath a hollowed log for hours. Water pours in sheets around you. The thunder is deafening, almost absurd. You lie still, soaked and shivering, reminding yourself that even storms have patterns. You count the space between lightning and sound, finding a rhythm in the chaos. You hum it silently in your head to stay warm. You start to think in silence, too. Your inner voice quiets. Thoughts grow less like sentences and more like impressions. A snap of a twig now triggers, not panic, but analysis. Height, weight, direction. You begin to live like silence unnoticed, efficient, ever-present. You return after several days, unannounced, slipping back into the barracks as if you never left. The instructors say nothing. They simply look at you a moment longer than usual. Then they hand you a bowl of broth and walk away. And that night, you sit with your unit again, around the fire. No one asks where you went. No one tells you where they've been. But you know who made it through by how they move now. Sharper, leaner. Silence has etched new lines on their faces. You feel it on yours too. One boy like Haon hasn't returned. You don't ask. That, too, is part of the code. The days afterward feel different. Not because the schedule changes, it doesn't, but because you have every motion you make is deliberate. When you roll up your bedding, the cloth doesn't whisper. When you lift your cup, it rests soundlessly. When you spar, you don't grunt or shout. You inhale, exhale, move. Instructors begin pulling you aside not for punishment, but for quiet missions. A message to deliver, a wall to inspect, a night patrol. With no explanation, you complete them without question, without complaint, without sound. That's the new currency here. Trust measured in silence. The younger boys start watching you more closely now. They mimic your walk, your way of sitting cross-legged with your hands resting flat, not fidgeting. One asks, "How do you stay so quiet?" You don't answer. You just raise your finger to your lips. He grins and nods. One night, your instructor calls you aside. You brace yourself for a reprimand. But instead, he leans in close and says, in a whisper so low, it might be imagined. Silence is memory. What we keep to ourselves becomes who we are. Then he's gone. You think about that sentence for days. You wonder if it's meant to reassure you or remind you of the weight you now carry. You don't tell anyone he spoke to you. That, too, is part of the code. And so your days continue structured, hard, wordless. You clean your tools without clanking. You run drills with near-perfect breath control. You measure every action with the same care an archer gives an arrow. Even your dreams now feel quieter, less chaos, more shape, more control. You've passed a threshold few ever do, and now you understand. In Sparta, silence isn't about what you avoid. It's about what you contain. Wire 17 now, and silence has become not just a practice, but a shield. It guards your thoughts, your actions, even your reputation. People trust you because you listen, because you do not reveal more than necessary. You understand the power in what is left unsaid. Your training intensifies. The instructors introduce a new challenge, the silent duel. You face another trainee in the arena, armed with wooden swords. The catch: no grunts, no taunts, no breathy exhales. Just pure, calm movement. The slightest sound is a strike against you. Your opponent lunges first, the air whooshing as his sword cuts through it. You parry silently, feeling the tension in your arms and legs. Every step you take is calculated, no noise, no slip-ups. You counterattack without a word, and the duel ends before anyone can catch their breath. Afterward, an instructor approaches and quietly places a hand on your shoulder. No praise, no scolding, just presence. That silent approval feels heavier than any shout. Outside the training grounds, you notice that Spartan society mirrors your discipline. At markets, transactions are brisk and quiet. At meals, Families eat with minimal chatter. Even the city's festivals hold moments of solemn silence, punctuating the revelry like breaths in a long story. One day, you hear a rumor about a Spartan soldier who, during battle, signaled his unit's movements using nothing but subtle hand gestures and barely audible clicks. This method baffled enemy forces and turned the tide of skirmishes. Historians still argue whether this soldier was a real figure or a legendary ideal. Either way, it reinforces the idea that silence is strategy. In your daily life, you practice moving like that soldier, silent, efficient, unseen. You learn to anticipate the rhythm of others' movements, so you can align with or avoid them without a sound. One night, you participate in a silent meditation exercise. You sit cross-legged in the courtyard, the moon casting long shadows. Your breath is steady, your mind quiet. Suddenly, the air shifts, a faint rustle, a whisper of movement. Instead of reacting with surprise or fear, you welcome it, letting it pass like a passing breeze. This moment feels like a breakthrough. You begin to realize that silence isn't just about control, it's about connection. The connection to your own body, to those around you, to the environment. It's a language without words, rich and complex. Your instructor assigns you to mentor a younger recruit named Cleon. He's eager but noisy, struggling to grasp the importance of restraint. You teach him through examples showing how to carry his gear without clanking, how to walk without disturbing leaves, how to breathe calmly under pressure. Cleon watches you closely, then slowly begins to mimic your habits. His voice softens, his movements slow. He starts to understand that silence is power, not punishment. During a feast, Cleon accidentally drops a cup, the crash breaking the room's quiet. Everyone freezes. The instructor gives Cleon a pointed look, but you quietly place a hand on his back, steadying him. You whisper, "Learn from it, but don't fear it." The night winds down with soft laughter and whispered stories. Even then, the volume remains low, respectful. You feel at peace. At this age, the Spartan concept of silence has shaped who you are so deeply that it feels natural, like breathing. You're no longer just following rules. You're embodying an ancient rhythm, one that ties you to generations before and after. And as you prepare for the final phases of your training, you carry this rhythm with. ChatGPT said, "You're 18, edging closer to full citizenship. And the silence that has enveloped you now feels like a second skin, worn effortlessly, invisibly, but impossible to remove. It shapes your interactions, your thoughts, your very breath." The instructors push you harder. One morning, you're ordered to enter the Agogi's greatest test, the silent hunt. You're sent into the wilds around Sparta, tasked with tracking and capturing a wild boar without uttering a sound or giving any indication of your presence. No weapons except a knife and your instincts. You move through the underbrush like a ghost, the years of training guiding your every step. You recognize the snaps of twigs, the broken leaves, the faintest scents. The forest becomes an extension of your senses. After hours of careful tracking, you find the boar resting near a stream, unaware of your approach. You steady your breathing, position yourself downwind, and close the distance with flawless quiet. The knife slides through silently, and the animal never lets out a sound. Returning to camp, you carry the prize without a word. The instructors acknowledge your success with a single nod. You feel a surge of pride, but also a solemn weight. You've crossed a line. You've embraced the silent predator within. That night, the campfire flickers low, casting long shadows. Older warriors tell stories of Spartan silence in battle, how stealth and surprise turned impossible odds into legendary victories. One tale describes how an entire enemy camp was infiltrated by shadows silent as death itself before the dawn's first light. You listen, eyes heavy, heart steady. These stories are the echoes of your own training. You begin to sense the subtle hierarchy of silence. Those who master it earn respect not by shouting but by the quiet confidence they project. You notice how Spartan elders communicate with barely a whisper, and how, even in heated debates, silence punctuates words like a blade dot. In your final months before full citizenship, you're assigned a crucial role, keeper of the silent watch during the city's sacred festivals. It's your duty to ensure that order is maintained, that no unnecessary noise disrupts the solemnity. You patrol the streets, hands lightly resting on the hilts of your sword, eyes sharp and alert. One evening, a group of young Athenians arrives, loud and boisterous. They mock the Spartans' quiet ways, laughing uproariously, disrupting the sacred procession. You approach not with anger or words, but with a calm stare that chills their laughter. One by one, their voices lower, their smiles fade, and silence falls. They learn quickly, in Sparta, silence is law. Historians still debate whether Spartan silence was a tactic to intimidate or a cultural value deeply embedded in daily life. For you, it's both an unspoken code that binds the city together. In your dreams, silence takes new forms. You imagine it as a thick cloak, a shield, a river flowing endlessly, yet never making a sound. It's comforting, familiar, and endlessly powerful. You feel ready now to step fully into Spartan life, carrying silence not as a burden, but as a badge of honor. You're 19 now, standing at the threshold of Spartan manhood, and the silence you've cultivated is no longer just a tool, it's your identity. It's the quiet in your movements, the calm in your gaze, the space between your words. The instructors have begun referring to you without the usual commands, just a knowing look and a nod. That means more than any praise. One morning you're tasked with leading a silent march through the city center. This isn't a practice run, it's a display of discipline for visiting dignitaries from across Greece. The streets are lined with curious onlookers, some whispering, others openly skeptical of Spartan austerity. You lead your unit forward, feet soft against the stone, breaths controlled, faces unreadable. Not a single word is spoken. Not a single step clatters. The city feels held in a delicate balance, suspended between expectation and awe. The dignitaries watch in stunned silence. Some later say it was like watching shadows move, fluid, precise, and utterly commanding. You catch a glance from one elder who nods slightly, a silent approval that means more than words. In the evenings, you join philosophical discussions held by some of Sparta's older warriors and scholars. These debates are unlike any you've encountered, mostly conducted through measured silences, raised eyebrows, and deliberate pauses. When someone does speak, their words carry weight, carefully chosen and delivered with gravity. You realize now that Spartan silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's listening as much as speaking. acting as much as waiting. One day, a new recruit arrives, a boy from a distant city, full of chatter and nervous energy. You watch him stumble through drills, talking too much, breaking formation with careless words. You take him aside, not with lecture, but by guiding his hands, showing him how to move without noise. Slowly he begins to quiet. It's a reminder, silence is a gift shared, not just imposed. Historians still debate whether Spartan silence helped forge unity or suppressed individuality. You know, it's a little of both attention that shapes every step you take in your dreams. You see yourself walking through ancient ruins, your footsteps echoing in vast halls where voices once shouted but now only silence remains. It's a quiet legacy, waiting to be carried forward. As you prepare for your final rite, the granting of full citizenship, you feel ready. Silent, steady, unyielding. You have become the living embodiment of Spartan discipline at 20. The moment arrives, the final ceremony marking your passage into full Spartan citizenship. The entire city seems quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. You stand among your peers, each wearing the marks of their journey. The deep shadows under your eyes telling stories of long nights and silent struggles. The elders gather in the center of the agora, their faces set and solemn. No trumpets announce the event, no speeches. Instead, the silence itself speaks volumes. You step forward, one by one, to receive the citizen's cloak, a simple, dark garment symbolizing your new status, as it's draped over your shoulders. You feel the weight of generations, the echoes of ancestors who understood that strength often lies not in words or noise but in restraint and stillness. Later that evening, you walk alone to a quiet hill overlooking the city. The stars are bright, unblinking witnesses to your journey. You recall the early days, the awkward stumbles, the failed watches, the nights spent listening to the wind and your own breathing. Now, the silence feels like an old friend, familiar, steady, reassuring. A soft breeze brushes your face, carrying faint scents of pine and dust. You breathe deeply, tasting the night. In this moment, you realize that Spartan silence is not a prison but a sanctuary, a place where clarity emerges and distractions fade. There's a subtle joke among your comrades about how Spartans can communicate entire battle plans with a single look, but you know the truth is more profound. Silence sharpens perception, deepens connection, and tempers the soul. Historians still argue whether Spartan silence was a harsh tool of control or a profound spiritual practice. From where you stand, it's both a complex dance between power and peace. As you descend the hill, you notice a group of younger boys practicing their silent watches. You pause to watch, feeling a gentle pride. The cycle continues, and as you return home, the city's quiet hum welcomes you back, not as a boy, but as a Spartan, now fully recognized as a Spartan citizen. Your life moves into a new rhythm, still silent, but with added responsibilities. The city depends on you, and your silence becomes a form of service, a constant vigilance that protects the delicate balance of Spartan order. You're assigned to the city's council chambers, not as a speaker, but as a silent guardian. Your presence alone reminds others of the weight of their words, or the value of choosing when to speak at all. You listen more than you talk, your gaze sharp, your posture steady. The council debates sometimes grow heated, but your calm silence acts as a counterbalance, an unspoken call to temper passion with thoughtfulness. You observe how power can be wielded in whispers, and how silence can be the loudest command. Outside politics, you mentor younger recruits, guiding them through the labyrinth of Spartan discipline without uttering more than necessary. Your lessons are given in gestures, in example, in the quiet patience of presence. They learn to speak less, listen more, and find strength in restraint. One day, an emissary from Athens arrives, brash and verbose. He mocks the Spartan ways, calling your silence a sign of weakness. You meet his challenge not with words, but with a calm stare that freezes his bravado. Eventually, he lowers his voice and listens. In that moment, you realize silence can be a shield and a sword. Historians still debate whether Spartan silence was imposed out of fear or embraced as freedom. You've come to see it as a choice, one that offers power without chaos. At night, the city feels alive with quiet conversations and soft footfalls. The flicker of torches casts shadows that dance silently on stone walls. You walk through streets that know your footsteps well, each step a reminder of your journey. Sometimes, you catch yourself smiling quietly at the thought of the noisy world beyond Sparta. You imagine its chaos and clamor, and feel a wave of gratitude for the stillness you've earned. Your silence is no longer just discipline, it's peace.